Thanks very much. So I first met MediaGoblin about 4.5 years ago. We were sitting in our flat in Brunswick, surrounded by cardboard boxes, eating Thai takeaway off a card table. And if you've ever tried to eat anything off a card table, you know it's very challenging, let alone when you're about to give birth in a day or two's time. So my wife and I were sitting there eating, having this discussion, and there's a discussion about sharing photos and videos and audio of our new family member. And there's nothing quite like trying to make a privacy decision for someone who can't make it themselves, that's closely related to you, to really heighten that sort of discussion. So that's really where I came to start thinking a lot about MediaGoblin. You might take away from that MediaGoblin is a tool for hacker parents to use for photos for their children. That's not actually the case. So MediaGoblin is neither just for hackers or strictly for baby photos, but it's a media tool for artists. Artists and painters and illustrators and musicians and 3D illustrators and modelers and things like that. It's a gallery format type tool. So the idea is that it's for curating, beautiful and interesting things. Not mass amounts of them, but a nice amount of really interesting things for you. I should point, it's actually, what I mean by not being for hacker parents is that it's not designed to be a system that is only used by technical people. It's designed to be something that anyone can work on their piece of art and throw it onto MediaGoblin as an afterthought as such. So I'll show you, actually. That's probably the best way. So this is GNU MediaGoblin. It's a web application. It's a Python server-side system. It's written in things that are like, it's Django-ish in what it's written in. It uses SQL Alchemy, Postgres, and a few other things that make that if you knew Django and you walked into it, you'd recognize some things. So let me log in. This is the home page, so you can see I've uploaded some things here already. I'll log in. I already have an account on this system. Okay, so I'll upload a photo. Now, I'm a very passionate free software activist, but there are some things that I find that are more important to me than free software, and one of those is bikes. So this is a photo of a type of bicycle that I actually own one of these, which is exciting. Sorry, the screen's a little bit small. There we go. Okay, so MediaGoblin lets you upload a piece of media. As you saw, I selected a photo. Lets you add a title, all the metadata you want. So you've got tags, you've got a license. There's a default you can set per your profile. So I'll hit add. And it comes back straight away saying, thanks, you've submitted some media. We can't actually see that media there yet because there's actually two parts of this. There's the front end web process running. Then there's also the process running behind the scenes that does the processing of the media. So for images, it might only take a fraction of a second and you might not notice anyway. But for audio and video and other things, which I'll show you in a moment, it does take a substantial amount of time. So if I refresh here, we should see a new photo there. So I'll go back to the home page just so you can get the full effect. So here's the photo of the bike. It's a tricycle, actually. I take my kids around in this. It's awesome. So we have all the kind of nice features that people expect in modern web applications where we've got commenting, we've got times, licensing. MediaGoblin also takes community really seriously. So there's things like reporting a comment if you think it's inappropriate or reporting a piece of media if you think it's inappropriate. And that's based on the terms of service of the MediaGoblin site, not any global sort of terms of service. So this is an instance that you run and you determine the terms of service for. There's a whole lot of plugins that come with this that you can turn on, things like geotagging of photos. So if you've got a photo that has your digital camera records a GPS reading on it, it'll display a little map in the corner to show you where it was taken. and works nicely on mobile, all this sort of stuff. So that's photo. Let me show you audio. So the idea being here that as opposed to just a Flickr reimplementation, which might be just photos, or just a SoundCloud implementation, which might do audio, or just YouTube, or Thingiverse that does 3D models, which I'll get to in a second. The idea is that it's cross-media, so it's centered around the author, not the media type. So here, I'm the author, and this is another piece of media I've produced. This is a recording my son and I did to remind us to put the chooks in at night, chickens, if you're not from Australia, but that's so that the foxes don't get them, so we have to have this alarm on our phone to remind us.
Bark, 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 bark.
So you get this nice spectrograph, you get a nice smooth media player, it all integrates really nicely. We can add comments if we want. I'll scroll down to find the button somewhere here. There we go. Similarly for video, you get a nice video player. This is the FSF's 30th birthday celebration video. Definitely worth a look some point if you get a
Software
chance.
is all around us.
Make some really nice points. So that would be the YouTube use case. Excuse me. This is definitely the most compelling for me, the video aspect of this, because being a technical person, I know how to use, I've strung together GStreamer pipelines and FFmpeg commands and avconv when that changes versions. And I've written all this stuff down, but it's still painful. You have to make these really hard decisions about what resolution it should be, and then you have to make sure it's named right, and you have to change the HTML files to embed the video. It's just really painful. And this is just a beautiful experience, just to be able to take a piece of video and there it is. So there we go. So we've got photos, audio, video. We also do a PDF. So this is a plugin that adds PDF embedding. So this could be, for instance, if you did talks, you could put your talk slides on here as well as your video or your audio of your talks. This is the pdf.js viewer, so we can actually scroll all the way through. You get to download the original PDF file as well. And for my last demo, I'll upload a new file. This one's quite an exciting one, actually. So the backstory to this model, this is a snail model. My friend made a 3D game in Blender, which is based on Python 3, actually, by the way. Snail. So the game's called Cargo, which you should go and look up. Now, so nothing's happened there, as you can see. Let me just see if I can pull up the terminal in the right place. Can I bring that to the front? Yes, there we go. This is the secondary process that I was talking about. So there's the web front-end process, and then there's this Celery back-end process, which is now just finished. But you saw some screens of information scrolling there. That was MediaGoblin talking to Blender. So it's taken this 3D STL model, which is a model that you'd use for 3D printing or something like this, and it's asked Blender to pre-render some shots of this 3D file. So this is a Thingiverse type replacement. Now this plugin came it was written in response to a bounty by Ava, one of the MediaGoblin community members, to win a 3D printer, and it came about in two evenings, I think, which is incredibly fast. So there's our snail. So there we go. There's a few different shots here, front, top, side, and then we've got this quite remarkable WebGL version as well. So here's your Thingiverse replacement. So that's really, yeah, I was quite impressed by that. You can also download the STL model. Great if you want to 3D print it. Okie doke, see if I can pull the slides back up again. Excuse me, just 1 second. Okay, so MediaGoblin is Python 3, as I mentioned. Well, it's Python 3 as of the recent 0.9 release. It's licensed under the Affero GPL, which is an excellent license if you are writing a program that runs on a server. Has a Django-like stack, which I mentioned. Lots of things there you'd be familiar with if you had done Django web apps before. It uses GStreamer, which is a really rigorous, solid, reliable media transcoding platform, especially as of version 1.0, which was upgraded about a year ago. If you've ever tried MediaGoblin before and had some issues transcoding different types of video, it's working really well now, so definitely give it another shot. It's a fully pluggable architecture, so everything, including the geotagging, the authentication, media types, all this sort of stuff, is done with Python plugins. So you can write a Python module and add that to the system, and you can have your own media type or LDAP authentication. Well, there's already LDAP authentication, but you get all that sort of stuff. And it has an API as well. So the web front end is great, but an API is really helpful for things like clients that need to be able to talk to it. Let me show you that as well. I meant to show you that a second ago. There we go. Okay, so you may have heard of the social network Pump.io. It's the second generation based on StatusNet. Pumper is a client for Pump.io, and MediaGoblin implements the Pump.io client-to-server protocol. So here, Pumper, the social network client, is talking directly to MediaGoblin. And Pumper doesn't know that it's MediaGoblin. It doesn't actually care. But what we'll do is we'll add a comment here. Oh, I don't think like actually does anything, but we'll add a like bikes. Send that message. And then if we jump across here, we'll see that there should be a comment down here somewhere. Yeah, it worked. I like bikes. So that's really important. So we're hooking into an existing social network here. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel with a new tool, which really, in the social networking environment, you can't afford to start your own social network. Oh, back to the start. Okay, so that client-to-server API happens through this. The actual name for the Pump.io API is called activity streams. It's basically shunting a JavaScript, a JSON block of data around saying this C Weber posted an image. The details of that don't matter so much. There's also a command line uploading tool, which is great if you're doing a whole lot of stuff, like you're running a conference, something like that. I find this really useful too. I use that to upload local user group videos, just so I don't have to wait for the web interface. I can copy the files straight up to the server. But as an activist, I think this is really important, having independent media. But I realize that everyone has different priorities in their own lives. And as an activist, I think it's really important that you act on your own values and priorities as opposed to what mine are. So MediaGoblin might not actually be the right tool for you. If you're happy just sticking your videos up on YouTube and your photos up on Flickr or Facebook or something like that, everyone has to, you have a limited amount of time in your life to think about these things, and some of these things might not be quite so important to you. That said, let's not forget where we're putting these cultural works that are really important to us. So these companies, generally for-profit companies, have slightly different values to us. There are some sacrifices here. So some of the things that the companies get, the Flickr, the YouTube, the Facebook, all this sort of stuff, is control over who sees the media. They get to censor unfavourable or challenging content. For example, New Zealand political cartoonist Malcolm Evans' cartoons about the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Or say you're a punk rock band, Pussy Riot, and making music about Vladimir Putin and the church's involvement in his election. Things like this actually really matter, and having an independent place to put media and publish that is outside what large for-profit companies deem to be appropriate is really important. The other issue is some of the broad, sweeping, keyword-based DCMA, which is a copyright infringement takedown notices. These are left to the onus. The onus is on the owner to respond to these things and try and get their media back up in these sort of systems. Where if you're running your own media system like GNU MediaGoblin, you don't get that. There's also this subtle effect where you have automated popularity rankings. So these sites get to decide what is popular because there is an algorithm out there that is determining this, or someone's tweaking that algorithm to determine quite what is popular. And I feel that these sort of things tend to strip a little bit of the richness and the diversity out of our media. We lose some of the unique perspectives and we get this sort of bland mainstream view of things. And who is to say, what if they say, what was PyCon like 50 years ago? What did people do there? Because suddenly the company doesn't value keeping those videos around. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's gone to look at an old talk that I was really looking forward to and found that the video was no longer online because the site had shut down or something like that. It doesn't need to be a big bang effect like this. It could just be the slow erosion of unpopular videos being taken down because they cost too much for the company to manage. That said, the aim isn't to replace enormous media hosting sites here. The idea is to scale down to individual households and organisations and community groups so that these people have the power in themselves to host their own media under their own terms of service. The idea is for it to be non-technical so that anyone can, the vision is for someone to be able to buy one of these things off the shelf, plug it in, and there you go. You can drag your media onto it and publish it like that. And now is the right time for this sort of thing because we have affordable, low-power hardware and we have fibre to the home in some places. I was lucky enough to move into a place where the first rollout of that was, so I feel like I can giggle about that a little bit. But the point here is that you control the data. You get to choose what the terms of service are and what doesn't fit those terms of service. So MediaGoblin is at version 0.9 at the moment. It's a young and ambitious project that has a whole lot more vision than just a photo gallery. It's really talking about building the modern social web to enable independent publishing. So the idea is not, so I'll talk about this thing called federation. So at the moment we have this approach where it's distributed as such in that you could run your own server in your own house. But that's not enough. We actually want we want the features of the modern social web where people can see a photo on someone else's site and comment on it and share it and all this sort of stuff. And a whole lot of the plumbing for these federation features happened in 0.9, but we're really looking forward to 1.0 to actually bring this all together and give us these features. That's under active development at the moment. The core developer, Jessica, has been working really hard on that. Federation itself, I should explain because it's kind of it's an unclear topic. So I talked earlier about the client to server API. Federation is much like, I would think of it like email in a way. It's the server to server API. So the idea is that you have a home server, much like you do with your email. And when you want to do something, you do that thing to your home server, and then that effect moves out into the network. So the idea here would be that, I've lost the picture, but so you might see you might be subscribed to someone else's media, you might comment on it. That comment first goes to your server, which takes a copy of it to display in its own information, routes it to the appropriate server on the internet. That server makes some state change, such as recording a comment against a piece of media, and then it pushes it into the destination owner's, like the author's inbox, so they can see it when they next log in. This server-to-server API is done in JSON activity streams, much like the client-to-server, but here it's a little bit more verbose because we actually have before we knew who it was, because it was client to server, we already knew who the client was. Here we need to know who, because it's going across the internet, the servers need to be able to talk about who the client is. Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, the idea here is to not reinvent the wheel with a new social network, because no one wants that. And if hopefully you're using Pump.io in a very small way, perhaps. It's certainly not a truly popular social network yet, but it has the makings of something that the open web could really embrace. And as a part of that, lead developer Chris Webber, who's there with the glasses in the middle, and Jessica Talon, who's there in the pink and the black jumper, have been working with the W3C social networking group for the last 2 years or so, trying to bring some standards to these systems. So they've been looking really hard at what is out there already and what the good practices are, and trying to come up with some great standards for this. And some of the things they're working on are Activity Streams version 2, which will be a JSON LD version, and a whole lot of other little bits and pieces, which I won't go into now. That's looking really exciting. It's nice to have some formalization of this so that other networks can embrace these tools too. So, MediaGoblin is turning your money into free software. All of Jessica's work in the 0.9 version was funded by the last campaign, and the MediaGoblin can be a success with your support. MediaGoblin is stewarded by the Free Software Foundation in the US, which means that they're obliged to act in the public interest with your money. So the FSF provides key infrastructure such as fundraising platforms and networks and all this sort of things to MediaGoblin. So I'd strongly encourage you to donate to MediaGoblin. I'd also encourage you to become an associate member of the FSF, because they're a fantastic organisation that does so much with so little. And while I'm here and while I'm wearing my Software Freedom Conservancy shirt, I'll also give a plug for the Software Freedom Conservancy. You may have heard of some of their work, some of the top Python projects that they steward as a non-profit in the US. G-Event, Calithia, Mercurial, PyPy, Sugar, Swig, and then some non-Python ones such as BuildBot, BusyBox, Git, Homebrew, Inkscape, QEMU, Samba, Selenium, and Wine. And these are projects that have all chosen to communalize their admin rather than wasting developers' time doing accounting and all this sort of stuff. So it's a really good project to contribute to. They also work incredibly hard on two or three full-time administrators working for Software Freedom Conservancy. So please become a member of the Software Freedom Conservancy. I'll be around for the next 2 days doing sprinting. So if you'd like to make a start contributing to MediaGoblin or free software in general, come and join me. I'd love to help you out. And to summarize, MediaGoblin is media hosting for artists. So if you're a pixel artist, you write research papers, meetup recordings, podcasting, stop motion videos, talk at conferences, photograph food, produce screencast, or are growing your very own hacker baby, MediaGoblin is for you. So get out there, do something amazing, and show the world with GNU MediaGoblin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. We have a few minutes for questions. Oh, well, you're done.
Well, that's going down. I'm a consulting software engineer and user experience developer, so I'm always happy to talk to interesting people about interesting problems. So come and find me if you have something like that.
Thanks for the talk. It's one of the gems that you find. I wasn't expecting that, so it was a really interesting talk. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, how do you do you support OEmbed? Because that's one of the ways that existing services can very easily get media from a public site onto their embedded blog and things like that. So is that one of the features that Goblin supports?
I don't think we do. I'd have to double check on that, but that would be a really good feature to have, and it'd be one that could easily happen in a plugin. So maybe you can come along to the sprints and help us out.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. I do photography, right? So I've got a massive NFS mount share with a stack of photos in it. Can I just point MediaGoblin straight at that, or do I have to import it into MediaGoblin's own file store, or like you showed the command line and the web interface to get info, data into it? Is there a way I can just point it at existing shares?
No, you will have to actually import it into the data store for MediaGoblin. It does all the hashing and making sure the file names are consistent and all that sort of stuff. And it produces intermediate versions. So say for video, it'll cut it down to the right resolution. For photos, it'll cut up a couple of different resolutions for different size screens. For audio, it'll process it into its standard WebM Theora, not Theora, Vorbis codec and all that sort of stuff. So no is the short answer, yeah.
I'm going to cheat and ask 2 questions, sorry. I was previously involved in developing Plumie on Plume. So I guess my question is, does MediaGoblin have the ability at the moment to allow multiple users on a single server? And the second question is, distinctly from that, can objects have a greater set of metadata than what you have at the moment, or is a plugin required to do that?
Okay, I think I'll try and answer what I think you're asking. So can you do multi-site?
Username.mediagoblin.myhome.
Sorry, say that again?
Just like my name dot my server.
So at the moment it's one server instance per data store, and that's all you get with one installation. I'd certainly like to see it go multi-site so that you can run, so you could run shared hosting out of MediaGoblin. Hosting is a really big problem with this sort of stuff, and Python certainly hasn't solved it by a long way. And there's some good solutions like sandstorm.io and things like the the Freedom Box. These are all things that they're coming along, but they're not there yet, and we need a good answer for that. And the second part of that was...
can objects get a greater set of media data relatively easily?
Possibly, I'm not sure. I know the data can exist in the database without plugins directly using it at that time. You can turn plugins off, but I couldn't say for sure.
I have a quick question. Did Tom Eastman's just talk yesterday about security and tidying up things that are uploaded give you pause?
I did enjoy that a lot, actually. For my work more than anything. But MediaGoblin actually does a really good job of this stuff already. So file names are already hashed. I did think a little bit about how you parse and suck the information out of a PDF without actually modifying it too much. But yeah, interesting.
I noticed it had Pump.io support. I was wondering if it had GNU social support as well.
No. So there's I guess you just have to pick where you're going with that. So GNU Social being the predecessor for Pump.io in terms of, it was StatusNet, and GNU Social spun out of being able to keep that network alive. There's no reason it couldn't, but maybe because the core developer of StatusNet moved to Pump.io without knowing too much about it myself, I'd sort of lean towards just going Pump.io. I'm not a truly informed person about to make that decision, but I think it probably will stay Pump.io.
One of the benefits of using public cloud services is backup. You sort of think, things might happen on YouTube, but it's unlikely they're going to lose my data. Does MediaGoblin do anything like that? Can it store it to S3 or things like that, or is it just a separate thing you have to back up server like any other database, etc.?
Yeah, it's essentially left to you. I don't think YouTube will lose your data in the short term, but we don't know about the longer term and DCMA takedowns and all that sort of stuff. If you're running this on your own, you are on your own to do your own backups and all that sort of stuff. It's worth pointing out, though, of course, that YouTube does offload some of these costs by the fact that they sell a whole lot of their data about what people do. They sell advertising on the site. They mine a whole lot of data out of YouTube that lets them offer this service for free of charge, generally. So there are, you are the product of some of these sites. It's worth keeping in mind.
Okay, one last one, and then of course we've got a break, so you can probably grab Ben then.
Hi, you've already covered a bit of what I was going to ask in terms of hosting. It's more sort of from my ops background, but I was going to ask about the backups. Have you got sort of a clear path for someone who might want to host on their own virtual private server or something like that, so you can do a bit of the backup type stuff with an image or whatever? I don't know, is that something you've considered, so someone could quickly spin up a DigitalOcean instance and use that to host their media, for example?
Yeah, I'm not truly across the sandstorm.io stuff, but I understand that is a platform as a service type system where you have a recipe that you can instantiate to give you a MediaGoblin server. I run it on a virtual server myself for 3 different sites. I do my own backups.